Hey guys, welcome to my side hustle, episode 6, delivering my first project, part 2. In the last video, which was like 4 months ago, thank you very much for your patience, we talked about how we started the research and formulated the big idea for the letter. So we're gonna pick up right where we left off. And we will also talk about how the overall process went for me, because as of right now, the letter is technically completed, and I say technically because they're still asking me for some small changes, which we will talk about in a second, but the work is done and it's been really good overall. I'm pretty happy. The client seems to be really happy, and the letter looks good, and we're all excited to see how it's gonna do in terms of the performance. And but you know, first of all, it's been so much more work than I expected, a lot more. And when I started, and I still do believe that it would take somebody with experience maybe 40-60 hours of actual work to finish the project of this size. So I budgeted for myself like 80 hours. Having completed that, and now looking back, I didn't keep the log, but from my memory, I think I spent like at least 120 hours, probably 150 hours on this thing. And what's even more important is that these 120 whatever hours were much more stressful than I expected. So let's talk about that first. I think there's like main 3 reasons why that happened. One is lack of practical experience. 2, changes in the market, like underlying market, marijuana market specifically, because it's the promotion was tied up to the marijuana market. And number 3 is, I think, like my fear of failure for this specific project. So in terms of number 1, right? When I started writing this letter, I actually had a really good list of big ideas, and they loved one of the ideas. It had to do with we called it all-weather cannabis. All-weather cannabis because their portfolio performs really well in both up markets and down markets. It performs better than the average market. So when market goes up, they make more money than others, and then when the market goes down, they lose much less than the index. So I kind of came up with this idea of like, okay, it will do well in all weather, in any weather, and it would have like all these instruments and stuff like that. It was pretty good. I'm pretty proud of that part, and they loved it. So, but the problem started when I started actually writing the letter. So the first thing I did, for some reason, like I picked a very hard to pull off and very unconventional format for the letter. I'm not sure why I've done this, but that's what I went with. Like usually, letters are written from a first person point of view, and it's written by the editor of the letter. So whoever kind of manages the portfolio, whoever kind of researches the stocks and does the analysis, usually they are the author of the letter. That's very standard. That was every single letter that I've read was like that. For whatever reason, I decided to write it from like a perspective of someone who kind of learned about the letter and then made money from that letter, and now he's promoting that letter to the others. So it doesn't even make any sense now that I talk about it. I mean, maybe it will work in some cases, but it was, even if so, which is doesn't really matter at this point. But what matters is like it was really unconventional and really hard to do, because you have to address the issue of why do you promote this letter for others? Like why do you kind of reveal your gold mine for other people? Because it makes sense when the writer promotes his letter, right? Because he's just trying to get business. You don't need to address that. But then if I read that letter and I want to tell you about that letter, then I have to kind of build a whole story as to why I'm doing that. And that's what I spent a lot of time on. And the worst mistake was not just because I've picked this unconventional format, but I spent so much time on it, like a month maybe, writing that piece. I've put a lot of details and a lot of work in this before I kind of coordinated with the client. And so what happened is like I wrote that. I tried to build that story, trying to sound convincing as to why I am promoting that letter. And I went and I almost like wrote a fictional story, right? It's like a fiction book, like rather than a sales letter. It was like a guy like so I had to make it like emotional because those are the stories that are interesting and that are convincing. So I wrote a story about like a guy who borrowed money against his house and like to invest in stocks, and then he almost like lost money and almost like ended his life and and like but then this letter kind of saved him, and now he just like, because it was so emotional, he just wants to like bring it to other people. So like total nonsense. But the funny part is like when I wrote it, and then the client kind of asked for updates, so I sent them like there's like 20 pages of stuff. There's like 20 pages of just that, and they read it and they're like, yeah, Arthur, that's not gonna work. And I was like, I even tried to like convince them otherwise. I'm like, no, like you guys don't get it. This is why it's cool. This is why this is necessary. This is how it's gonna work. Once the letter is complete. But they were kind enough to sort of like reason with me and give me all the sort of facts why it's not gonna work. And as I was going through it, I kind of realized, yeah, I'm just probably just too invested into this story because I spent so much time on it. But like it's completely ineffective in terms of selling. So I had to scratch it. Yeah, it's been like midway through the project and like months and like 20 pages, and I had to completely scrap it. I think what helped is that they really liked the big idea, so they probably were like willing to spend time on this. But yeah, so I went back to work from scratch again, and I took the more conventional approach where I wrote about from the perspective of the author of the letter, sales letter, I mean the editor, and it worked great. Like I wrote it and it was amazing. It was much more easier too. I didn't have to like come up with all this crazy stories, and it worked like a charm, and they loved it. And I was I guess a little bit traumatized by the initial feedback, so I was my confidence went like completely disappeared. And when I sent them that second draft, I was very nervous, but it was very I felt very relieved when they came back. Oh, this is good. So yeah, I think that was the biggest reason for why I had to do so much more work than it could have been. But yeah, biggest lesson also, even if you make bad decisions, just coordinate with the client before you commit hours. So it's good to outline things and kind of give the preview of like teasers, right? Okay, so here I'm going to talk about this, here I'm going to talk about that, and this is the plan. Do you guys like it? And then if they say yes, go ahead and like put the work into it. But I think the biggest mistake was that I've done a lot of work up front and then I showed them and then they didn't like it, so I have to redo it. It's easier to coordinate as you go. So another reason why it went so long and so much more than it could have been is because the marijuana market changed a lot. So we started, right, it was like a summer almost, right, end of summer, I think it was like August, and marijuana market was already soft, but not as bad as it got in the second half of 2019. And as I was writing, and especially with these delays and I had to rewrite, it was getting worse and worse. At some point they just said, hey, most letters focus on the big things, right, because they made a lot of money going into 2019 with their marijuana portfolio, and that's what I was focusing on. But then they're like, hey, Arthur, the recent data is kind of a red, so we cannot just promise good results and hype up the potentials. We have to address the downsides and the risk and why things been red. And so I had to come back and work that into the portfolio, into the letter. So that also added a little bit of a complexity. So it's kind of like the market changed midway. And so but actually that also relates to why they like the all-weather approach, because from that lens, from that big idea, you can address both up markets and down markets. So that was good. And the last reason was about my kind of like desire to make this as good as it could be, because when I was writing this, I was planning to use it as a marketing material for myself, for my copywriting business. And it's the best way if that first promotion I write is going to be amazing and it converts and it works, so I can take it and I can show it to other publishers and I can use it to land more clients. So that's why I was really like invested into doing a really good job with this specific letter in particular. So I think I kind of went a little bit overboard, because their previous rendition of this campaign, the letter was like, I think like 20 pages, final product. So my draft right now that I sent them, because I say draft because the visuals, some of the visuals are still missing. I think half of the visuals are still missing. So it's already at like, I think 45 pages. So which means once all images are done, it could be like 50 to 60 pages long. So it's like 3 times longer than their last version of this campaign. But that being said, I've done everything I could have given my level of skill and my experience, and I'm pretty proud regardless. But it's hard to tell, for me at least, how it's gonna do. So I'm very excited to see what's gonna come back, and hopefully they will run it soon, because I think the market is recovering right now, so it might be a good time to run some ads. So yeah, so that was my overall experience with writing that letter. Let's see. Now I want to talk about mechanics. So let's talk a little bit about mechanics of writing the letter. We spent a lot of time talking about like big ideas and research. So now let's talk about actually putting words on a paper. And I'll quickly repeat the main sources that helped me to get the job done. And it really is the videos from the 300K guy on Reddit. And his stuff is really good with big ideas and overall strategy and overall like a mindset and of how to write the letter. Very helpful, because that's like 80% of the success, really. But 80% of work is in actually writing the letter, and that's where this video is not going to help you at all, because they all focus on the big things. And that's where I think the second source was very helpful. It's like clicking ads and reading the actual sales letter, because you understand, okay, there's 60 pages of stuff usually, like average letter is like 40-60 pages long, and your headline and your lead are like maybe 25% of the letter, and then the rest is the body of the letter and the offer, right? So that's where most of the work, like mechanical work, is. And I thought I would be good to just go ahead and write it based on looking at what on the samples on the internet, but it was really hard, because you don't understand. Like I personally couldn't figure out, okay, like how does it actually work? Like I see the end result, but I cannot really do it myself. So, and that's where the Kyle Milligan's book came very handy. The book is called Take Their Money, and that book gives you anatomy of the letter. It tells you why there's this line and why there's this section, and it gives you tools on how to go about creating those parts and making sure it all makes sense and it all flows really well. So that was, I think, very important for me to being able to finish the job. So yeah, I want to focus right now on the body of the letter. But before we do that, I do want to make sure that we do understand that the most important parts in the letter are your headline and your lead. Because if your headline doesn't catch the attention, nobody's going to open it. And if your lead doesn't provide sufficient promise and doesn't give sufficient, what do you call it? 1 second. Body doesn't matter, captures any credibility, that's the word. So if your lead doesn't give sufficient promise, and if it doesn't provide sufficient credibility, people are not gonna go into your body, so your body doesn't even matter. But if they do, and as a copywriter, I came to appreciate the body a lot, because that's where I spend like most of my time actually typing stuff. So I want to talk about the body. So this mechanics coming is from Kyle Milligan's book, and it's a formula, kind of like a template, and it's amazing. Like it helped me a lot, and I just absolutely love it. How simple it is and how effective it is. It goes like this: it's objective, claim, proof, and benefit. So objection, claim, proof, benefit. And what it means, it gives you a framework on how to write pieces of your body. Because a lot of times when you start, more or less you understand what's your headline and what's your lead is, and you even understand what's your offers, right? You want them to buy something. But what's in the middle? That's like the middle part is missing, and a lot of times you can ask, okay, how long the middle should be? Do I even need the middle? What's the point of it? At least those are the questions that I had, because I didn't really understand the middle, to be honest with you. So this one helped me to understand. It's all driven by objections, because once your readers will see your headline and your lead, they will start having objections in their mind, and doubts and questions. And the body is where you basically address all the objections and questions and concerns of your potential customer. So let's maybe look at the example. So in my case, right, I've been promoting a subscription to a marijuana stock newsletter where there's a portfolio, and then they sort of recommend you which stocks to buy and which stocks to sell at what time. So let's say my headline captured the attention. People, oh, marijuana stocks, I'm somehow interested. My lead gave them enough promise, make this much with this and this, and here's who I am. So they're like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. And then the body starts, and then what kind of objections could be there. And it's important to distinguish between objections that matter and objections that don't matter. So if I write about marijuana stocks, and it's a fairly advanced kind of like a letter, so I don't think I care about objections like stocks are bad or like stocks are risky, because this is not my target audience. If somebody doesn't care about stocks, I don't think I want to sell them marijuana stocks specifically, because that's not the way probably to start your experience with stocks. That's why I don't really care about addressing that objection. But let's say the objection is, I don't know anyone who made money in marijuana stocks, or marijuana stocks are down entire year, or worse off, like I've lost money on marijuana stocks. So those are real concerns, because we know that because 2019 was terrible for marijuana stocks. So it is expected that my target audience would have objections against marijuana stocks, marijuana market in general. So that's the objection. And it should drive my copy. So I have it, okay, this is one of the objections I came up with. People don't like marijuana stocks, like marijuana stocks are down. So what's my claim? The claim is a counter kind of an argument, right? So somebody could say, marijuana stocks were down for the year. My claim is, yes, but they are on a rebound. So that's like a claim. And the next part is proof, which is where you spend most of your time. It's providing analysis and evidence to support your claim against their objection. So in my case, it would be like, okay, let's look at why marijuana stocks were down for entire 2019. And then let's look at why that is changing and why we think it's going to be different going forward. So that's where you invoke analysis and data and facts. That's where the analytical part of the letter is, and that's where a lot of research comes in handy. And then the last part is benefit, because once you said, okay, marijuana stocks, like I lost money on marijuana stocks. Yes, but that was in the past. Right now, the market is changing. Here's why they were down. Here's why they are. The situation is changing, and here's why this is all going to be up. So, and now, if you've done a good job, they should be on board with you. Like, oh, okay, the market is actually changing. Yeah, it was bad. Now it's getting better. So you have to tie it up to the benefit of, here's like a stock, for example, the safest stock to get you on that trend, or the most aggressive stock to get you on that trend, whatever it is that you're selling. You have to kind of tie up the benefit into your analysis. So, and you do that, you find all the objections, and you could easily find 5 objections for something like a stock promotion. Like another one, could be something like, why can't I just buy like big marijuana stocks? Why do I need to know your specific stock, right? And then you can do, you could buy a big stock, but for example, all the money been made in like unknown stocks, like secret stocks, or all the big stocks has already made their profits, and then you go into the proof again, and so on and so forth. So you do that until you're done with your objections. And in my case, that kind of dragged, that's what dragged really the whole letter to like almost 60 pages there. But you identify it, and then you make your case, and then by the end of the letter, they should have no objections, and then they should agree with you logically with your analysis, and then they should see how the benefit how you, whatever it is that you offer kind of benefits them based on your analysis and your claim and your headline. So that's the video, guys. But before we go, I want to talk about what to expect from this channel going forward. So I'm planning to make one last video for the My Side Hustle series, and that's because I'm not planning to do much of a copywriting going forward, at least in the near medium term. And that's because I recently discovered a project that I want to spend all my free time on, and conceptually it's kind of related to both copywriting and side businesses, but in practice, like in practical terms, it has nothing to do with either of those. So I'm sort of starting from scratch again. And I think I should clarify that my decision to sort of switch my focus right now from copywriting to something else has nothing to do with the way this first project went in terms of how much work it is. I still think it's copywriting is pretty good niche, and if my goals were still the same, as in like I want to maximize my cash and start building the side business, all this sort of goals, I would still stick with copywriting. I think it's pretty good for someone like me. But the thing is, it's just my goals have changed, and I think right now I have more important things to focus on. So that's why I'm just going to start a new series about that new project. So but do stay tuned because I do want to make one more video about copywriting, and I will wait until the publisher runs the campaign, and I hope I don't think they will have any issues for me kind of putting the campaign here. Like I'll put the letter on, and then I'll tell you how the letter did, like in general terms, like did it do well, did it do really bad, or like did it do average, and hopefully we could talk about it on this channel, and that would be, I think, a really nice wrap up for this series. And I'm pretty happy I actually done copywriting, because while I cannot be sure, but I do hope that the letter will do really well, and that this is something I can have to my name, so that down the road, if I do decide to come back, or I need income, I need to make more money for whatever reason, I can always just have a letter that done really well, is proven, and I can show it to some publishers and maybe get some business going again. But yeah, so until then, yeah, have a good time, everyone.